Okay. We've often, you and I, talked about Cy. What year did he die, Virginia?
He died in 1956.
Oh my.
He had a heart attack, a sudden heart attack. He had just been a month before the executives of minor executives of the company. He was then working for the Alcoa Steamship Company. He went there in the early days of the British at war, before we were at war, and he was the Furnace lines were very anxious to keep him, but everything at that time in England was of course, was secret, and he was the highest American in the company, and he said he felt just like an office boy because while they treated him very well. And he heard that after there was a deal that some of you may remember, when we gave when President Roosevelt offered the British 50 out-of-date battleships for bases in the West Indies and in Newfoundland and Nova Scotia for us to build. At that time, the aluminum company was sending empty freighters down to South America and the Guianas mainly, and Trinidad to bring up bauxite, which is made into aluminum. And they were just talking about this base deal, and my side heard that they were thinking of starting a freighter and passenger service. And he went to talk to Bill White about it, and he said, "I know all those places because I've spent much time in them." And he said that I think you'd find that's very profitable. And the president said, "All right, we'll give you 6 months to start a line." And he started in, and while they were in the process, then they became enthusiastic. Alcoa was the aluminum company of America, their steamship business, and they decided to build 3 beautiful ships, which would be combination passenger and freight, that could pull the bauxite. He got together, rented various old ships, and started the service, which is a terrific job because it had to have just to get all the maritime law and things like that. And they started it, and we went down on the first voyage of the ship, and that was fascinating. And they took down the workmen and the materials to build the bases at these various places, and then they got bauxite and brought up the bauxite and brought the people back and forth, and it became a great success. And he and the others together ran that line all through the war. They kept it going. Of course, the beautiful ships were taken from Alcoa even before they were finished and taken over by the government, as everything was. And they were given, Alcoa was given the old ships of various kinds, coastline ships mostly, because the submarines were down in the Gulf waiting to get particularly the ships that brought the bauxite up and the oil tankers. And it was very sad. I recall we often would get calls. I would get calls in the middle of the night, and there would be another ship sunk, which was very hard. But they had made a success of it and kept the line going. And then after the war, they built again the three ships and ran a very successful, wonderful series of for many years of trips. And let's see, was that what you? No, then so that he was very busy and very happy at his job and with Alcoa. He was the advertising and passenger manager, and I've forgotten what else. But at any rate, he had a sudden heart attack when he was apparently perfectly well, and died in just a few days.
That must have been
it was a
dreadful
terrible blow.
Oh, of course.
And the hardest part was that Jenny was sent as an American Field Service representative to Turkey that summer. She was one of the first to go to Turkey, and she was on her way home on this slow ship when I couldn't tell her that he was very ill, and he died an hour before her ship docked in Hoboken, which was a terrible blow.
Oh, that's very sad, Virginia. Well, that must have changed your life
Very
considerably.
And I immediately wanted to go to work. This is what led me into library. And I knew, well, first of all, I had a job at the master's school. I needed money, and I also needed to not have time to think. That was my main feeling, and I didn't care about the activities that I was doing as a volunteer. I needed something more than that. And I worked in the alumni office first, and then I got into the library. We had a wonderful librarian, and she asked me to come over and sit for evening library.
And that was
at the master's school.
Yeah.
And
But who was the librarian?
Alice
then?
Walton.
Oh, yes.
Wonderful person. Oh, and the girls were devoted to her. And when they had Alumni Day, all the alums would come back to see Alice. They thought so much of her. At any rate, I said, I won't do it. I don't want to come and sit. If you'll give me some instruction in handling the desk and the more or less routine things, I'd love to do it. Well, I went back and worked at first, just 2 nights a week and more, and then I loved it so that I went there. She managed to get enough money to pay me at a rather low rate. For
Do you want to tell
full-time.
me how much did they pay you when you
I
started?
got up to, they paid me
To start with.
To start with. Well, they kept me at I was getting $1.25 an hour in the other
Oh my
place.
goodness!
And I got up to $3. I got up to $3.50 an hour in the library, and then Alice said, "Now you go over and tell him that you're paying more an hour for the man who cuts your grass." So I told the headmaster. They had at that time I was not particularly fond of, and I said, "What do you think of that? I'm a Cornell graduate and a Phi Beta Kappa, getting less than the man who cuts my grass." And he said, "Well, that is outrageous. How about giving you 25 cents an hour more?" He really did. So that I got up. I did take my Social Security at 62, and then I had to give up for every dollar, for every $2 I earned, I had to give back $1, you see. And the last year I was there, that was such a nuisance. I said, I don't suppose you want all this in the...
Just keep going.
Anyway, I could, a person getting Social Security could only earn $1,680 a year. Yeah, and so it was such a nuisance figuring and giving back money and so forth. So I said, the last year, just pay me $1,680 and I'll work all the hours they needed me. I loved it so.
Oh my! What year did you stop working
I
there?
stopped in 1972 when I was 70 years old. I thought that was a good time to stop, and I thought, what will I do with myself when I wake up in the morning and don't have to go to work in those icy days of driving up the hill to open the library at 8 o'clock. And but I went to volunteer at the Hastings Library and got involved in other things, and I never have had time on my hands. I can't imagine it.
You've been very active in your church, haven't
Yes,
you?
well, I've been, yes.
I mean,
have
beyond
been,
going to church.
Well,
you've been-
I've tried, because my church has been very important to me all along, and my present minister, Joe Gilmore, I am simply devoted to. I think he has done more for me in widening my understanding of all kinds of people and my desire to help. It's hard to say that because I've always had a desire to help if I could, but he has particularly done that. And he's done a great deal for our village, I think. He organized the consortium that have the midnight runs and so forth and so on. And there are a good number of temples and churches in that now. And
Yes, there are many of us hard-boiling eggs.
well, that's it. I know. We get a little card in the would say our turn is this week. So I got a dozen eggs and I hard boiled them. I wouldn't dare not.
Of course.
It would be terrible.
When did you join the literature club?
I belonged for some years, I've forgotten how it happened, to a literature club in North Tarrytown, and which I enjoyed, and I enjoyed the group of people. It was quite a different group of people. In that literature club, we each selected one book and gave a report on that book a year and gave the name of the book. There was no real organization, but it was quite fun, and I really enjoyed it, and I felt, well, I have to prove what I can do, so I really worked awfully hard on some of my books. I think I did on all of them. Well, in the first place, the club, so many of the older members died off, and I was really quite a young member at that time, and I had to travel farther and farther up. They took in Croton and the northern, a good deal of northern Westchester, and I was getting less and less the feeling of caring about driving. I did not enjoy driving those distances, and there were very few people here. And at that time, it was suggested to me that maybe I could join the Hastings Literature Club. I'd never been asked before, but I had heard about it. And I thought, well, I was so interested in the programs they had, and it seemed to me that it was fun to work on to work on a program in that way. And at any rate, I had the good opportunity of joining that, and I gave up the other one. So that's the story.
Were there other people from Hastings in your other group?
Well, I think I was the first, and I got in several people. Alice Walter joined it, and then she decided to go into the Hastings Club, and she gave it up. I can't think offhand.
Was Geraldine Toth in that?
Yes, she was for a time, too.
And want to talk a little bit about the Hastings Literature Club?
Oh, that has been a joy to me, the Hastings Literature Club. We have had such lovely members, and almost all our programs have been really good. Their programs for the year, which we discuss at length and turn in various suggestions. I have enjoyed practically every year of programs. And I have found that our members, for the most part, with very few exceptions, worked hard on the assignment that they had, and turned out a really interesting program. We have discussions on them afterward, and it has been a great source of pleasure to me, and the group has been such an interesting group. And I think that it's been so good for me, now that I'm retired, to have something I really had to work at. You can get easily in lazy ways otherwise. And it's always been fun for me to work on my program, and I've always felt it was a challenge, and have tried to do a good program.
And you have. I don't have any other formal questions, if you will, but I wonder if there's anything that you'd especially like to talk about, or perhaps your feelings about Hastings as you're about to embark on your new adventure in life.
My feeling about Hastings, it's a place I love very dearly, and I have always felt that way. As I said, we have lived here for over 50 years, 50 years in my own dear home. And my children have such a strong feeling that when they come back, I know Ginny likes to go out and stand in the street and just look at Euclid Avenue. And my grandchildren like to come back. And I have two lovely daughters-in-law who are crazy about this house and about Hastings, and they would love to come and live here. They're unfortunate. Ginny said that either John and Sharon, or David and Becky would have snapped up the house, but they have their various businesses and interests are elsewhere, so
Yes.
it's not possible. But it's nice to know they feel that way. In fact, David and Becky, one grandson and granddaughter, will be here this weekend with me with a U-Haul to take back some things, and I know they're going to be sad that the house has already begun to be not looking like itself anymore. But it's fun to have them.
Would you like to talk a little bit about what it was like being the mother-in-law of the governor of Pennsylvania?
Oh, that has been a lovely experience. It has just been so, well, it has, at an age when you expect life to be quieter, it has really been an exciting life. I admire my son-in-law and my daughter very, very much.
Do you want to tell us your son-in-law's name?
My son-in-law is Dick Thornburg. He is now the U.S. Attorney General. And he is a brilliant and the most caring, and well, he was known in Pennsylvania as Mr. Clean. So, and that name still seems to cling to him. And I know that he's just tops. I don't always agree with him on his decisions and things, but I know he reaches them after much thinking and sometimes agonizing over them, and I respect his right, just as he respects my opinions, fortunately. But I've had such a happy time. The governor's home in Pennsylvania is a very beautiful home, and they have opened it to the public. It had not been open much before. The previous governor had not enjoyed living there. And they had a bad flood in Pennsylvania. The house was inundated up to nearly 6 feet. And after that, the house was closed for several years and practically rebuilt. And the governor and his wife rented a place outside, and they wouldn't even come back and live in the house. They had it fully staffed and entertained there, but that was all they used it for. But Jenny and Dick decided that it would belong to the people of Pennsylvania, and it would be open to all people. And they did a great deal of open house entertaining. And then Jenny opened the house to the public. It was open 2 days a week from early March until the end of October. And then she had buses of school children come in, and it was a beautiful. She had one of their associates who was a professor of an art professor at Carnegie Mellon University, came and helped her assemble an art collection. They thought up what they called a traveling art collection, and she was able, this friend went around to all the museums and the collections in Pennsylvania, and at first it was hard for them to realize that people would come and see the art, and that that it would be cared for properly. But by the time their 8 years were up, the museums were just trying to get, we have a new show, please let us bring the show. Mm. They specialized in Pennsylvania artists and people in Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. Not entirely, but that was great, and they often had shows of those. There's a good museum in Harrisburg, a very fine director of that museum, and he worked with the people, and she had a volunteer group of 52 men and 48 women who started in the beginning, were trained by the art director, and whenever there was a new showing, and the same group practically, although there had been some additions, ended up at the end of 8 years. They gave a great deal of time free to this, and they were a great addition because they would take people around and describe the art. I learned so much about art in those years myself. It was a wonderful thing. But they had so many, and they entertained foreign people who came. They had been in Africa on a government mission, and they entertained one of these, a chief of Africa who came with his family retinue, and he was interested in farming here. And they took him not to a show farm, but to one of the farms where they were doing the things one that was a family outfit. But he also had a group of something like 60 hangers-on. So when they entertained them at luncheon at the house, they had a great, large hall filled with all these so-called hangers-on who were part of the retinue. And that was fascinating meeting them. They had one group of Chinese governors of provinces who came over to study various things. And it was there were so many interesting things going on there.
And there were also a couple of good parties for Virginia Judson, weren't there?
Oh, yes. They gave me a party for my 80th birthday and a party for my 85th birthday. And believe me, they were wonderful parties.
Well, that's wonderful. And your son, Cy, lives in Connecticut?
My son, Cy, lives he was in the Marines, and he went to college after the Marines. Went up to St. Lawrence University, worked his way. He wouldn't let us pay anything, and worked his way. Came out with almost honors. This is the boy that he just missed honors, and married a nice girl from there, and they are still in Connecticut raising a nice family.
Mm.
So
and they have grandchildren of their own now.
They have one grandson, and so I have two great grandchildren who are Jenny's and Dick's grandchildren. And I have one, and another one is on the way. So 2.5 I really have from their family.
Lovely.
And one from my son Cy's family. So it's very exciting to have great grands, you know.
I imagine.
You have such fun with them, and then you go away and don't have to worry about any of their problems.
Indeed.
So it just is very happy. I have 5 grandsons and 2 granddaughters, and I have 3 great-grands, which is a nice feeling.
I should think so, and I'm sure that you're going to take many memories of Hastings and your new venture in Falls Church.
You bet I am. I just never forget Hastings, and I hope I've been already invited back to visit, so I'm looking forward to that time.
And we'll look forward to seeing you again, too. Thank you very much, Virginia.
Oh, dear.